By now, you know there are lots of ways to play tabletop RPGs. One of the big things that comes up is how many people do I need to play a tabletop RPG? Welcome to Master the Game. I am Juice. Let's get started. Make sure you head on over to rpgjuice.com, where you can get caught up on the latest videos, the latest news, and blog posts from Juice himself. In this series, we've talked about all sorts of different topics, and in this video, we're going to hone it down to just the amount of players in your group and how that might affect your play style and your game itself. If you are new to tabletop RPGs, you might not realize how easy it is to get started in this hobby. And the first thing you need to figure out is how many people are you going to play with. And this can vary from one person other than yourself all the way up to as many as 15 or 20. Now, that's a little extreme, and I will tell you right now that is very difficult and time consuming, and I do not recommend playing with that many people, but there are people out there who have done that. If you're going to play with just one other person, you have to decide who's going to be the game master and who's going to be the player. I play with my daughter this way all the time, and in fact, I let her control more than one character. You know, you can do this in your games, or you could literally just run what is called a solo campaign for a single person. Now, I've heard a lot of stories of people doing this when they got into the hobby with their brothers or sisters back when they were in middle school and late elementary school, and they have wonderful memories of doing this. There's a lot of benefits to doing it like this as well. One of the big things when you're doing a one-on-one game is it's really easy to tailor the game around the player. It's kind of like in video games how the story always revolves around the player and their backstory and NPCs they know. And this is a wonderful experience if this is something you're interested in. It's also a good way to break someone into the hobby, whether it's just to show them some mechanics or to do a session 0 or something like that. It's a really good way to do that. The fact that the player gets a lot of attention makes them feel very involved and can give them the most immersive experience of any of the options. If you're playing with 2, 3, 4 players, it changes a little bit. Now you're weaving in other characters' stories. It's not as focused on a single plot line. Sometimes you're working in different characters' backstories or NPCs. What might interest one player might not interest another. You might have one player at your table that really likes combat, and so you're just doing a lot of combat, and that person's going to have a great time in that session. But you might have another character who really likes the social interaction. The big thing when you're playing is make sure that you're trying to equally involve all your players. So if you know you have one player who likes a lot of combat, and you have another player who likes a lot of social interactions, you can appease them in various ways. You can tailor part of the session for combat and then another part of the session for the social aspect, or have alternating sessions where one does have a lot of combat. The next session might have a lot of social interactions. You might have a player at your table who really likes more of the adventuring and discovery and puzzles. This is a whole nother element that the other players might not be that interested in. So then weave that into it. When you have multiple people, the more you have, the harder it is to appease all of them. But there are also some benefits to having multiple players. Sometimes as the game master, you can step back and let the players interact with each other and take notes. Observe what they want to do based on their conversations with other characters in the group. Their interactions with NPCs, things that they're actually role-playing. All of these things you can take little clues from. So a 3, 4 character campaign, in my opinion, is actually ideal because you can still do some stuff that you do when there's a solo player, you know, incorporating backstories more, weaving things in, making sure you're focusing the story around them. But you also get to take a step back and watch the other players interact, and you can observe. And I think observing is a huge benefit to experienced DMs. Observing is a very, very useful skill for experienced game masters. So the sooner you can learn how to do that well, the better you will be. I just want to give a quick shout out to the software D&D Beyond. If you're playing D&D and you're not using D&D Beyond, you are missing out. So head on over to D&D Beyond. You'll just need a Twitch account to get started and check it out. See what they have to offer. I guarantee you it will improve your gaming experience beyond your wildest dreams. When you hit 7 or 8 players, it becomes a little more difficult to incorporate backstories. However, you can still observe, you can still let your players interact with each other, interact with NPCs, and get a feel for what they're interested in. When you get to about 7 or 8 players, I feel it's important to focus on what the majority of the players like most of the time, and still incorporate the other things to mix it up and to still make sure the other players are having a good time. It's going to be harder to incorporate backstory stuff. And if you do, you're not going to want to spend as much time focusing on it because you have so many players. When you have 7 or 8 players, when you're trying to craft a whole session around one character, that's awesome for that one character. That makes it really hard, though, for the other players to really get into it. For them, it's just another quest, And so I do think you still need to try to do this, but don't be surprised if some of your other players seem less interested. What I've seen in the bigger groups, that tends to happen more in store play, when you're running Adventurers League or even convention games. If you don't limit how many players can play in it, I've seen as many as 8 players there. I've heard crazy stories about Kevin Sambita from Palladium Books running games for 15 and 16 people at the old gaming center in Detroit many years ago, and many people say they have witnessed it and it was fantastic. I can't imagine running for that many people. I feel like I would lose my mind, but it's been done. I've heard other people say online they've ran for groups of 10. I don't know how you can do that effectively. Now, all of these scenarios are assuming we're talking about in-person games. When you're talking about playing an online game over the internet, such as using Skype, Google Hangouts, Zoom, whatever your preferred thing is, and also using Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds and things like that, whatever you choose to use, I would recommend keeping your amount of players to a minimum. And what I mean by that is I think 3, 4 is perfect. I would try not to go to 5. I do know some people who like to run for 2 or 3 people online. But again, I wouldn't go more than 5 people. It just starts getting a little crazy. Now, every now and then, if you want to bring like a guest player on, say it's a friend who just wants to pop in here and there, I think that's okay. But what you'll find online is the gaming is much more intense. Most online games have much less player banter. There's definitely less out of character stuff, which is great, especially if you're into that. It's more about the role play, whereas in person there's a little more out of character talk, and it's more about the experience of hanging out with each other. Whereas online, like I said, it's all about the role play, and so you're more into what's happening in the game. Players tend to be more focused and quiet and have less distractions, which is wonderful. And the thing you'll find is a 2 or 3 hour session online feels much more purposeful, much more intense. Like I said, intense might not be the right word, but focus might be the better word. And I think you'll find that you're able to accomplish a lot in those 2 or 3 hours, whereas in in-person game, it might seem like things take a little longer to achieve. Both very different experiences, and I recommend, like I said, 2 to 3 players for online is awesome. 4 players I still like to do. I actually like 4 players in my games, both in person and online. I think that's ideal. Sometimes having a 5th in person is really awesome. Sometimes only having 3 online is awesome. So that's kind of where I stand on that. You can do whatever you want. Try different things. Find out what experience you're going for, because you will find that a lot of variables, things that we've discussed in this series, such as play styles and things like that, will drastically affect the feel of your games. And the number of players will drastically affect it as well. and you just need to find what you prefer. So again, in person, give me 3 to 5 players. Online, 3 or 4, and I'm set. You can play, again, one-on-one. I feel like a one-on-one game, no matter what, always feels a little more focused, whether it's online or in person. And again, you can get a really, really good experience with this. Really allow somebody to feel like they are the hero, the main character of the story. Imagine any movie where you have a single main character like Conan the Barbarian. You know, obviously he has support roles, but Conan is the hero of that story. And that's the type of game that you could try to emulate in a one-on-one session. And so that's a good way to do it. Anything like Lord of the Rings, where there's lots of key roles and starring characters, that's more of like a 3-4 person, 5-person party. Anything beyond that just seems a little bit much for my personal taste. So that's what I would recommend. You know, but you can play this game with a lot of different players. A lot of different scenarios call for more or less. If you have a larger party, say it's 5 or 6 people, and they decide to split the party and it's at a key time of your session, you might even think, hey, next session, let's do you 3, since you split off, we'll meet up this day, and then you 3 will meet up on this day, and we'll play separately. And then by the end of that session, you'll come back together somehow, and we'll pick up the following, so 3 sessions from now, with all of us. That's a cool thing you can do too. So again, there's a lot of ways to play the game, a lot of different combinations of players and things like that. So I would definitely experiment if you are new to this and see what you like. Be sure to give me a like below, smash that subscribe button, and leave me a comment with how many people you tend to like to play with if you've played before. If you haven't and you're just looking to get into this, post below some of your thoughts, and if you have any questions, I will happily answer them. This was Master of the Game. I am Juice. Game on.